Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome to Unusually Horrid Blog. My name is Nikki. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so glad you clicked on my thumbnail. I hope you enjoy this video. Before we get into today's video, I did kind of want to address something really quick. I kind of made like a whole video about this, and once I watched it back, I was like, honestly, I just seemed a little bit more than I wanted to. So basically, I just wanted to address some of the deleted files issues. I did delete the first episode of Vlogmas, which was supposed to be a chaos craft video, and I'm gonna be honest, that craft was too much of a pain in my butt to justify filming it again for you. So I'm just gonna take 2 seconds to show you what you missed. So I made these little snow globe Christmas ornaments with some pictures I printed off online in these clear Christmas balls that you can get from the Dollar Tree. It was supposed to be like a whole Dollar Tree craft video, and I suck at technology and it's gone. So I just wanted to share these with you so that, you know, there's evidence in the world that they exist and that I did try and make episode 1 actually happen for you. And with that being said, enjoy episode 3. I hope you are ready for this. Okay, this one's out here. So I don't know how to start this. Okay, this is probably the craziest theory I feel like I've ever come up with in my head ever. And if somebody else has this theory, like, please say something in the comments, because I've only ever come across one other person who has ever said anything like this. So buckle up, because I'm gonna tell you about my craziest Christmas movie theory. So the Christmas movie in question today will be The Polar Express. So I feel like we need to, before we talk about The Polar Express, we need to go back a couple years. So let's time travel a few years. The year is 20-something teen, and I have just finished reading Stephen King's It for the first time. Now, if you know me in real life, which I know a few of you do, you know that that book is my everything. My everything. I love that book more than I've loved any book I've ever read in my whole life. But I finished that book in December. Not long after I finished that book, I decided to watch a little known movie called The Polar Express. And I don't know if it's because I watched way too much film theory, because I watch way too much film theory. So I was watching The Polar Express after having just finished Stephen King's It, probably the night before, or at least the week of watching this movie. Anyway, I'm sitting there watching this movie going, why does the conductor remind me so much of Pennywise? That's a good question, right? But here's where I'm gonna get into it. So, spoilers for both Stephen King's It and The Polar Express. If you haven't seen The Polar Express, what are you doing with your life? It's Christmas, go watch it. If you haven't seen it, I'm not gonna blame you. It's a weird movie and not everyone's into that. If you don't know anything about it, Pennywise is sort of this interdimensional being that represents all of evil. A lot of people describe Pennywise's character as just like a creepy clown, but honestly, that couldn't be further from the truth. And if you've read the books, you know that he's like not a clown the majority of the time. So what most people refer to as Pennywise, or as most of the time the kids in the book just call it, has these powers where he can conjure whatever you fear the most, and he feeds off that fear and he feeds off you. And because fear is such a strong emotion or whatever, you know, he only feeds once every 27 years. So that's basically the premise. You have this evil being, feeds off fear, goes around, shapeshifts into your biggest fear to get a reaction out of you, then eats up that reaction, eats up you, goes and hibernates for another 27 years. So you're probably going, okay, and how does this remind you of The Polar Express? And it's not so much that Pennywise reminds me of The Polar Express, it's more like The Polar Express reminds me of It. So in Polar Express, you have this child sleeping, and all of a sudden this train comes out of nowhere. There's no train tracks on this road. Everything he's seeing is made by magic. So let me throw in a third movie here to absolutely just confuse the hell out of you guys. Monsters, Inc., right? At the beginning of the movie, they are trying to scare everyone and get that kind of energy, the energy from being scared. By the end of that movie, spoiler alerts if you haven't seen Monsters, Inc., another one I'd recommend. Spoilers, though. If you haven't seen Monsters, Inc. by whatever chance, you know that by the end, they change their formula to laughter, because joy and happiness and laughter is a stronger emotion. So with that kind of thought in our head of fear being a strong emotion, strong enough to build energy off, but joy and laughter being like way, 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 way higher on that energy scale to where you're like pumping out energy way faster and way more efficiently. And it got me thinking while I was watching Polar Express, having just read it, going, wow, this all seems like really familiar. So then I started to theorize. So what if Santa Claus from Polar Express specifically, it doesn't really work out in any other Santa movie that I've watched so far, but Polar Express Santa and Pennywise are the same type, not the actual same. They're not the same interchangeable, the same creature. They are the same type of creature. So we've got one that feeds off evil, and then Santa here, he feeds off joy. And I feel like in my head while I was watching this, I was like, no, this makes so much sense. Oh my gosh, Pennywise in the book can change into any monster movie, any childhood fear. He can turn into your parents. He can turn into a giant bird. He can turn into the wolf man. He can turn into flying eye leeches. He can literally make you see fortune cookies on your plate pop open with eyes in them. Pennywise can pretty much do anything to your brain that he wants to do to get that fear to come out of you. Now, thinking about Polar Express, everyone's played, and I feel like this is a detail that really just like locks it into me, is that everyone is played by Tom Hanks. I get him and Tim Allen mixed up all the time because I'm a 90s baby and Toy Story, and they were in that movie together, so they might as well be the same person. So everyone in that movie is played by Tom Hanks. Not everyone, but like a lot of the people are played by Tom Hanks. The fact that you have Santa has like the same kind of voice as this guy on the train, it kind of just like clicked. And I was like, wait, what if the conductor is also Santa? And I was like, but what if the train is also Santa? What if all the other kids are also Santa? But even then, all the other kids too could definitely be real, because Santa obviously needs to like feed the same way that Pennywise would need to feed. But I think because joy and happiness are such strong emotions, he doesn't need to kill them to feed fully off of them. But also at the same time, he sees way more kids than Pennywise. It also came back to the fact that like, it's an annual thing, right? Santa Claus comes back once a year, whereas Pennywise only comes back, you know, once every 27 years, which I feel like you could get into a debate here on like, is fear the stronger emotion because he can feed longer? And I feel like I would agree with that, because I feel like your childhood fears kind of set you up for like how you go about the rest of your life. Whereas like you can feel joy and happiness at any moment, and it's like so fleeting. Like you're always chasing the next happy moment. You're not chasing the next scary moment. Well, some people are. Some people love adrenaline, but generally you're not trying to be traumatized at any given moment. So with that, I feel like it's like a fleeting sense of joy that feeds him really well for a year, but then he also comes back every year and feeds again. And his way of eliciting the emotion that he has to feed off is obviously Christmas magic, right? Spreading joy, spreading cheer, Christmas presents, you know, all that stuff like builds in this belief and makes him stronger. And I feel like that's maybe on the counterpoint of maybe the reason he can come back every year is because he's stronger, whereas Pennywise is a weaker form and can only come back every so often. I don't think that Pennywise and Santa are the same being. I definitely think that like one is the good, obviously Santa's the good, and Pennywise is like the bad version of like this creature. So another reason that like this theory in general was also kind of like into my head too was like the ghost character that you see in Polar Express throughout, the one who like helps the boy, and he like has this little music box and stuff, and he's kind of there to like scare him into believing in Santa a little bit. So it's almost like Santa knows that fear also will work on these kids to get that emotion and like feed him essentially. So the entire time I was sitting there watching Polar Express after reading this book, I'm like, no, wait, that makes sense then, because like there's no way any of those kids could have survived the like roller coaster part of the train ride, like standing on top of the train and like walking around. Like it's all something that Santa curated for this child to get him to believe so that he can feed off of him. Obviously, this is just a theory. There's like certain scenes in it where everything is completely handcrafted to this child, whether it's like the entire room is different, the entire environment could be completely different. And the thing is that no adults ever notice what's going on when Pennywise is doing something to a child. The adults are like totally blind, which in it is like obviously a metaphor of like adults ignoring like kid problems and just like being blind to child's fears when they're rational. But to tie along my theories together in a nice little Christmas bow, none of the adults in Polar Express know what's going on either. You're really gonna tell me that a giant massive train is gonna pull through a neighborhood that has no train tracks, full of kids, and not a single adult is gonna wake up and ask, what's going on? Think about it. Because it's all created. The train, the kids, the conductor. The conductor in this is the like creature, the reason all of them can see anything. So you're probably going, okay, but like what about when they get to the North Pole? There's all these elves. Like how can Santa like manipulate something so grand? And that goes back to my theory of the fact that he feeds off of so many individuals in the world, whereas Pennywise feeds off like 5 or 6 kids and then sleeps for 27 years. Like Santa comes back and feeds every single year. And in my theory, like obviously Santa's like into it, right? Like he likes to do this because it helps feed him. So the power that he gets yearly from feeding off millions and millions of children, obviously he's pretty powerful. He can do whatever he wants. He can manifest presents for you every single year. He can build an entire neighborhood full of elves if he wants to, because he's that powerful. Or at least that's how I justified this theory in my head. Again, this is just a theory. Do I think any of the writers ever even thought of it while they were writing Polar Express? No, why would they? Those are very polar opposite stories, but it was just something I couldn't help but like think of right whenever I watched that movie after I read the book, where I'm just like, these themes are familiar, like creating this world experience for a child to like feed off of their emotion. And in Polar Express, belief is like a huge part of Santa's power. For example, with the bell, and this kind of ties into Pennywise as well, is that the adults forget. The adults lose the ability to hear Santa's magic bell. Once you get to a certain age, or once like the kids from it got to a certain age, they completely forgot about Pennywise. And once kids, you know, get to a certain age in life, they suspend their belief in Santa a little bit, you know? So that's like another interesting thing where I'm like, these match. These go together. The adults forget, the adults pretend it's fake or, you know, whatever. And the same thing is like true in It, where the adults turn a blind eye, they don't believe in Pennywise, they just think the kids are being kids. Obviously, the stories are extremely different. Like, I'm not trying to say that they, like, mirror each other at all. I'm really only trying to make the point that my theory is that the conductor is Santa Claus because he's all of these beings. So the conductor is the Pennywise type being of the Polar Express, where he's Santa, he's the conductor, he's the ghost, he's whatever he needs to be to elicit belief and joy from children to feed off and sustain himself for another year, sustain the magic he needs to create gifts for kids for another year. Just in the same way that Pennywise elicits fear to feed on these children, and like I said, he needs to like eat them because it's not as powerful in my theory. It's all a theory. And then he sleeps for 27 years because he's not necessarily as powerful or as needing of power as Santa is. Santa obviously needs a lot of energy and needs a lot of that power to sustain himself to a certain extent. If he's going out every year and giving these gifts to get that power, it's almost like he has to give so much because he needs so much, and it's like a never-ending cycle, which is getting a little ranty. Anyway, you see what I mean? Hopefully. But anyway, that was like my point, is whenever I was watching that movie, I was like, wow. So yeah, if that's something you ever noticed, if you've read It and then watched Polar Express after, was that something that you thought about, or was it totally not on your radar at all? If you've watched this so far and I've made a single coherent thought about this theory and you agree, or if it made you think in a different way at all, let me know. Because I've been sitting alone in this theory, like rambling to my husband about how Pennywise and the conductor are the same type of creature, and he's like, sure babe, sure. I'm like, no, look at all the evidence. He feeds, they feed, they rest, they come back. Like, they set up a scene to get your emotion. So yeah, that was my wild Christmas movie theory. Obviously, I watched too much film theory and it's clearly turned me into a film theorist, but next time you watch The Polar Express, if you've read it, if you've watched it, you could probably catch up on things too. I feel like if you've read the book, you might be able to grasp it a little bit more, because I feel like the movies don't do Pennywise enough justice for the fact that he's like this ethereal being of pure evil and not just like a shape-shifting clown. Because to reduce Pennywise to a shape-shifting clown is, you're taking all the scary out of. That's not even the scary part. He's literally an interdimensional being of pure fear. And I guess my theory is that Santa is an interdimensional being of pure love and joy. So if you watched this video and I made any sense at all, give this video a thumbs up. If you think I'm absolutely crazy, give this video a thumbs up. If you think I wasted your life by watching this video, good. Now you get to know how I think when I watch Christmas movies. But yeah, thanks for watching another episode of Vlogmas, and I'll have more Vlogmas for you later. If you watch Polar Express with this in mind, let me know. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if you think I'm crazy. Just let me know. Let me know your feelings about this theory. And have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good life. I hope your holiday season is going well so far. Unusually Horrid out. Okay, bye!